You see this face? This face right here? You see this face? We've got COVID. It finally happened. I think I've already had COVID though. So, anyway, today I'm going to talk to you all on the podcast about how we address illness in the holler as holler neighbors. Because when one person's sick, we kind of address it as a group because we're a community. And so I'm recording the podcast live. If you are watching this on Float or on Odyssey, I can't see your comments today. I don't have it set up. Hey, Amy, nice to see you. Amy, can you let people know on social that we're live? Please, please, please. I know you know how to cut and paste. And did you see my typo today? I called it convades. I'm just going to call it convades from here on out. Anyway, I'm going to talk about how we address it as a community. It'll be a live recording of the podcast. I did it live because I thought y'all might have some questions and would love to build your feedback or questions into the show. You're going to get glasses glare today because this is like raw sick me. I'm not sick, though. I don't feel very sick. I just have a headache. Anyway, so that said, Tactical Redneck got convades. And yeah, COVID hangover. Convade, C-O-N-vade, Tactical. I think we're renaming it. He was complaining that he felt like he had a hangover, but he hadn't been drinking because he hasn't been drinking for a long time. And finally, I'm like, maybe we should take your temperature. And sure enough, 99.1. And then we had him do a test and he came back positive. And now the symptoms that he has, and I'm just totally Tactical. I have your permission to share this, right? Because I asked this morning. Anyway, the symptoms he has are like some really sore muscles, and he had the night sweats and those sorts of things. No shortness of breath. Doesn't feel great, but doesn't feel that bad. And we were prepared to address illness here when it happened, just because it's like this has been going on for 2 years. We have a good idea of what helps support your body through the illness. We have a pretty good idea of lifestyle changes that need to happen. And Tactical made a really big lifestyle change that I'm sure has made this whole thing better. So good for you, Tactical Redneck. And nutritionally, we don't eat a lot of crap here. So like nutritionally, we're all in a good place. And so that's worked out really well. Anyway, what I'm going to do, I'm going to start this like a normal podcast and say, welcome to Living Free in Tennessee. If you have comments or questions you want me to see, like I can kind of see them right now in the 10-point font that's on my screen. But if you really, really, really want me to see something, then go ahead and put it in like all caps in the comments on YouTube. If you're on Float or on Odyssey, I'm sorry, today I don't have it in me to multitask. And because the brain frog is real. The brain frog is absolutely real on this thing. But I don't have it in me to multitask that way. At some point, I may want to get somebody to do some moderation if we start getting more traffic on Float and on Odyssey. And then I've been having an issue because Float is upgrading all their systems. Like sometimes their feed goes out. If that happens, guys, on Float, I am Living Free in Tennessee on YouTube. I am Living Free in Tennessee on Odyssey. You can go see the live stream there if it stops on Float. Anyway, we're going to start the podcast now. Sending Tactical thoughts and prayers from Central Minnesota. Tactical, you got thoughts and prayers. He's on. I told him to be on. I was going to actually kind of like stream him on, but I don't know if I trust the internet from the cabin to come up here. Anyway, that is what it is. Let's start this podcast, shall we? Welcome to Living Free in Tennessee, where we talk about building the life you choose on your terms. Today is Monday, January 24th, 2022, and this is episode 525 of Living Free in Tennessee. And I have to admit something here up front. I almost said 2021, and it's entirely possible. Last week I did. I do that in January. I say 2022 in December. I say 2021 in January, and then I sort of figure out what year I'm in. It's all about, awareness of where you are. Like if I'm ever in the hospital and they ask me the date and I'm a year off, like whoever's there advocating for me, just know that sometimes I'm just a year off and that's normal. That doesn't mean that my brain's not working. If you ask me the president and I don't know who that is, then it's more likely that my brain's not working. That is what it is. Anyway, The thing has landed, guys. Convades has landed in the Holler. We have it here. And years ago, I did a show after Norovirus came through my house over Thanksgiving on how we handle illness in the Holler. Well, since then, the Holler neighbors have come to be, and we have this intentional community around us. And I wanted to give the updated approach in a post the thing world for how we handle illness in the Holler. So that's what we're going to talk about today. And I'm doing this live so that people can ask questions or give comments in the live feed. And then I'll probably, if you guys are into it after the show is recorded, like the recording part is, and I'll totally stay after and have a talk about how we're addressing this issue in the Holler. I do want to remind you, spring workshop tickets are on sale. The link for that is in the show notes. It's livingfreeintennessee.com if you're just hearing the audio. And then there's a link at the top that says workshop. There's a button there at the moment. There's also a post on the homepage, but that'll be gone by the end of the week because other things, it's sequential. We're almost sold out. I had a period of time over the weekend where apparently my form wasn't working, so I had to go fix that. So if you tried and it didn't work and it said we were sold out, we weren't. I just didn't do my math right. So we have a few more tickets for anybody who wants to come. It's a $150 deposit to hold your spot. That is refundable for the next 2 weeks. And then, and then after that, if you want to get it back, it's transferable. Just I can link you with a network of people who usually want to come. We have a few people on the wait list already who aren't quite ready to commit right now, but we'll know in a couple weeks if they are able to come. And so, I always try to hook people up on that. Also, if you want to send feedback or questions to me, you can do it. Nicole at livingfreeintennessee.com, or head over to livingfreeintennessee.com and click on contact, and those emails come to me. And gosh, guys, 2 weeks ago, I pulled the trigger. I completely bombed any email apps from my phone so I can't cheat and look at email on my phone, and my whole world has gotten so much better. Now, when I see email, it's on my computer where I can also log into my website and deal with problems if there are order issues at Holler Roast, or I can link people to people. It's totally changed my world. I'm convinced none of us should have email on our phones at this point unless we aren't required to follow up on our own stuff. Just my little opinion there. With that, it's time for the first segment of today's show, Tales from the Prepper Pantry, where we talk about storing what you use and using what you store. Sue Zoldock put a really cool post out, and she was showing people her inventory system with light bulbs. And she's very particular about light bulbs, but she has, lives in a house, has a certain amount of light bulbs. And she said, this is how I never have to go to the store. I have an inventory management system. This is how it works. And she has shelves with light bulbs. And she said, when I got in here because I needed a light bulb, and annoyingly, it wasn't here because I had never stocked it. And I needed 2 of them. So it would stand to reason you buy 2, right? No, she's like, you buy 4 so that you have the 2 you're putting in and the 2 in backup. So next time it goes out, you grab them and then you reorder. That's pretty much how we handle our inventory here. I have a little bit more because I store a lot of food and other things. I'm actually blocking a user right now because they're being dorky. Bye-bye, user. Don't come in and mess around on my comments, guys, and don't spam, or I will block you from the channel. Totally willing to do that. Anyway, so we store things in long-term storage, which is the Prepper Pantry. Right now, it's under the carport because I put another freezer in there for the cold months so it wouldn't get too cold on the freezer and break the freezer while I'm using it. So I have some paper goods out under cover, and we're going to be redoing those shelves in there because I need the shelves to work for me, and they do not work for me right now because I have prefabricated shelves, and I'm going to do custom shelves for what I actually store. Anyway, that's long-term storage. When I need to resupply something in the house, great example of this is toilet paper. I keep 4 rolls of toilet paper in my bathroom in a thing, and about once a week I go through and I top it off. So long-term storage has the big old cubes of toilet paper, and then I don't have to have that cube in my house anywhere. And then once a week I go through and I top it off and I take from long-term storage. Well, on the day where I take the last toilet paper roll from the cube, what I do is I put it in my bathroom, and then I go to my little dry erase board that says resupply, and I write toilet paper cube. And then that means it's time for me to source a replacement cube. Now, what's happening in long-term storage at that time? I still have another cube. So I've got like 3 months to deal with that situation. I don't need I don't need to run out and get it. And, then on my regular order schedule, I can order it. If they're out, I'm not like panicked. And for another 3 to 6 months, depending on how long it takes me to go through the cube, I don't have to, as I call it, buy toilet paper like a plebe. What that means is like, I have the one I like, I have the price I like, I have the amount I like to get. That's my toilet paper. I say change. Occasionally I might assess and change what kind of toilet paper I use, but that's the one I want to get. What I don't want to do is buy 6 rolls at Walmart because that's my only choice because they're out of it everywhere. So that's how with toilet paper is the example because we're talking about convades today. That's how I do it. And it works really well. I do that with condiments, with light bulbs, with cleaning supplies. I've started doing it with clothing, although I don't put them in the Prepper Pantry. I keep a pair of jeans on backup so that when I break my jeans, I have them. Sometimes I'll go down to no backup because I'm doing a resize of Nicole. And when I'm resizing Nicole, I don't want to keep things around that are too big or too small. And we are doing that. Somebody in the comments is laughing because I called it the Convades frog, the brain frog, instead of brain fog. Yeah, I called it brain frog. I'm just going to call it brain frog from now on. Ribbit, ribbit, ribbit. You do get some brain frog. Really, you do. I think I had some of that. I think I've already had it. So I think I had some of that last fall. And those of you who get coughing from me may have noticed sometimes it was pounds short. Sometimes that was me. Sometimes that was people helping me. But like, I didn't know I was sick if I was sick. But I did have some brain frog issues after having my cold in November that I had no way to test to know what it was. Okay, so here's what's going on in the pantry. 1, I have run out of beef. Here's why. Convades is here, and one of the things we're doing nutritionally is eating beef. And it was like, we usually resupply beef in December, but the timing this year got delayed with the processor, so the beef is arriving next week. Somebody in our network will, if you're on MeWe, said, hey, I got an extra half cow. Anybody want a quarter or a half? And I was like, well, we eat more than a half cow a year, so because there's 4 families here. I'm interested. And ended up making a deal with him to get another beef. So beef is resupplying this week. And then next week, the other half cow that we were already in process of getting is showing up and we will have beef again. But that one was real close to the line. And that makes me kind of happy because it means that I used what I stored within a year in the freezer and I ate all of it, including the tongue. There actually is 1 pack of liver left that I'm not eating. That's Nighthawk's job. He needs to eat that, but he said he doesn't have room for liver in his freezer right now. We also have come to the time of year in the Prepper Pantry where we have the jar problem. It's called the jar storage problem. So we put things in jars to preserve them. And then at this time, in the summer while we're growing them, and then we use them at this time of year, right? So like green beans or whatever, pickled beets, pickles, pickled dilly beans, like all of that stuff. And we end up with empty jars. And now I have the row of 3 by the row of 9 jars on my dining room, or actually on my kitchen counter in the way, empty and clean and nowhere to put them. Don't be a Nicole. Have somewhere to put them. The issue I have right now is that I could put them back where they were, but I already had jars like double stacked on some shelves that I don't usually do that with. So I usually put empty jars back where the full jars were, but there's this like 2-case buffer where I have to figure out where 2 cases of jars go. I'm hoping when I get the shelves in the Prepper Pantry that there will finally be dedicated space for the empty jar problem. And Amy Dingman saying the empty jar issue is real here. Yeah, she knows exactly what I'm talking about. She must have that buffer problem too. In about another, let's see, 4 jars of green beans, I finally can just start putting the empty jars back in my shelf that's only supposed to have 1 row, and then it's all fine. But this goes back to how we manage our houses. I am not the master at this. I'm getting better. There has to be a system for everything. My jar system's pretty good, but that 2 or 3 case buffer is what it is. And I don't want to get rid of those jars because I do use them. And then sometimes I give jars to people. They don't give me jars back. And there's this sort of outflow of jars. Occasionally, somebody remembers to give me the jar back. And I'm not a jar Nazi. So I don't run around like, hey, I gave you pickled stuff. You have 5 of my jars. Give me my jars back. Yeah, that's not me. It's not worth it. It's like $2 a jar. Nah, life goes on. I still have not restocked my January restocking. I have moved the list from the dry erase board to the phone. So if I find myself at a store, which apparently right now, because the Convades has come, is not going to be anytime soon, I can just buy whatever they have. I had already done kind of one round, spent about $80 at the grocery store, getting condiments I knew I was out of, and it's all fine. I'm not worried. I'm not in a hurry. As I mentioned in the toilet paper example, I've got 3 to 6 months to figure it out on some of these things. There's nothing that I'm absolutely out of. Okay, last thing I wanted to do was share with you a lamb rib recipe. So we bought a whole lamb, and we have every year. And the thing that I end up not cooking on lamb are the ribs. Now, one of the best part of the lamb, the ribs. The reason I put off cooking it is it's not a high volume of meat, and people around me eat a lot of meat, and I eat a lot of meat. And so it's like, here's your appetizer rib thing. So I have 2 racks right now. And the other reason is you can do really fancy things with lamb and cook it to rare and all of this stuff, and like do a rack of ribs, a lamb rack. And I've done that. It takes some time and care, and it's special. And I have a tendency to keep the ribs for it to be special. Okay, that's great, except for when you keep the ribs for 2 years and they go bad in your freezer, meat can go bad in your freezer. The fat will go rancid over time. Luckily, that didn't happen. I was a year into the last lamb, and it was 2 weeks ago. And I was like, you know what? Rather than do this like beautiful column mash sculpted lamb rib thing, which I could do, I decided to look up what other people do. And I found a really good roasted rib recipe where you go at 400 degrees for 2.5 hours. So you're like, these are not rare, but they are tender. And all you do is you dry rub that with some salt and some garlic and some red pepper, like red hot pepper, if you like hot pepper, or a red dried pepper that's not hot if you don't like hot, or you could use paprika that's hot or paprika that's not hot. And then black pepper. Do a nice rub, put it on a rack, and trim the fat a little bit before you do the rub. Put it on a rack on a cookie sheet so that there's maybe a 1/2 inch between the lamb ribs and the cookie sheet, because the fat's going to render out, and just roast that puppy for like 2.5 hours. It's a very simple recipe, and it's so good that I pulled the other 2 racks of rib out this week, and that's what I'm cooking this afternoon for dinner tonight, because it's tasty. So highly recommend that recipe. Highly recommend considering simple recipes when you're doing stuff, because a lot of time when you go online and you like research stuff, it's like a 17-step process with exotic flavors and all these things. And that's because we seek variety and different flavors, right? Well, you'll hear later, as part of the nutrition plan, we are not doing exotic for a week or 2 here. And that simple recipe is the first thing I'm jumping in on. And I will be using cayenne pepper because that's an immune system boost. I will be using garlic. I will be using salt and pepper. I will not be using onion. And I'm going to roast it that way and serve it. And I guarantee you it will be fan-freaking-tastic. So if you have lamb ribs that you're looking at going, I don't want to ruin them, do what I said. You won't ruin them. They're really good. Next segment is Operation Independence, where we talk about building local, ongoing revenue into our lives. It's all about Taj Mahal. You've heard about Taj Mahal. I think it's funny when people see the addition being put on my house and they can't remember what it's called, because it's called Taj Mahal. Taj Mahal is a 30 by 50 foot building. Building is kind of an over dramatization of what it is, but it's a building that's going up in front of my house with clear roofing shingles, so the sun still hits my house. And last week we tore the front porch off, and today Ken Esch is out there doing his favorite job. He is digging holes. Do you know what happens when he digs holes? He smiles. Totally smiles. Actually, he's pretty cheerful about doing hard work. I wish he had a helper today, but I did let him know that we have the convades, and so everybody makes their own decision on that. Of course, the dogs bark. Tactical, why are you letting the dogs bark? Cece, leave it. Anyway, so that's going up today. So I believe he's setting posts today, and then we put the roof on. And then it's done. And it's this beautiful space where we can have events and other things. And I do apologize for the dog barking. Once a dog barks outside, all the dogs have to bark. That is the way it has to be. Okay. Next segment. You ready for it? It's the main topic of the show. Yes, how we address illness in the holler. The holler neighbors are what I call an unintentional, intentional community. And what I mean by that is that we all have our houses and we all have our fiefdoms related to our houses, right? And that means that we operate as a community or an intentional community, and we have started talking about how that works and doing cooperative projects with growing food and other things. But it wasn't intentional to begin with. It's just that we had, it all started with my podcast. And these guys listened to my podcast. And eventually one of them came out to one of my events. And then he decided to move to Tennessee. And the place next door to me was for rent. And he's still there. And then another one got done with the military and ended up renting my cabin. And he's still there. And then we bought a place that went for sale, like across the road, but one house down. Bought that place and it became a rental, and we rented it to Jenny, and she's still there. And when we always kind of ate meals together here and there and did projects together here and there. But when Jenny moved in, she's like, hey, why don't we formalize this shared meal thing and rotate around? And I was like, okay, that's awesome. That's a great idea. And we started doing it. And over the last 2 years since Jenny's been here, we realized that we can do events as a community, that when crises happen, if we work together as a community of 4 families, we can address those crises. And it actually works as a system of mutual support, but we can also do shared projects. So we have pigs here that we're raising together, and then everybody will share in the meat. We have, I have animals, and everybody in the holler knows how to take care of my livestock, so that if one of us can't do the livestock for whatever reason, somebody else can fill in. And that has served to be a position of strength. And now I get to go talk about the unintentional, intentional community. Would I like to see it grow? The right personalities coming in would be great to have. We've learned a lot about interpersonal dynamics. Jenny's been instrumental in sort of encouraging us to address hard conversations that need to happen, which when you learn how to do that is better. I'm not going to say we're awesome at it, but I am going to say we try to come at things from a position of we care about each other. We're not trying to undermine each other. That's really important. And to be clear about where the boundaries are in our living situations, because I see a lot of people pushing boundaries or saying that's okay to let it go. Sometimes you can't let it go. And, if Nighthawk wants to raise whatever cattle on his property, it's his property. Is what it is. If it starts smelling real bad, then I'm probably going to have a talk with him about that because that's affecting my property. But other than that, if I'm like, I don't think you should raise cattle there, none of my business. None of my business. So we have a healthy respect for it being my business. Well, what does that mean when illness comes? We've had illness come through here a couple times. 2019 Christmas, Nighthawk got strep throat really bad. And we didn't know what it was. And he was super sick. And he ended up staying home and isolating. And I brought him some elderberry syrup because we didn't know what it was. And eventually he found out it was strep throat. But one night he spiked a fever 101, 102 and didn't have Tylenol. Jenny had Tylenol. So Jenny brought him Tylenol. And it ended up being something that we sort of addressed as an as a community, and then we kind of set up a schedule of checking in on him and navigated that illness. Well, right after 2020 December, guess what happened? 2019, 2020. You guys remember 2020 when Convades came to be? And yes, Z Torrance, I do see your question. We're taking questions after the podcast is recorded, and we're talking about how we address illness in the holler. But welcome to the feed. Anyway, we addressed things as a community. Well, then Convades came and there were shutdowns. Jenny hadn't actually moved here yet when that happened, but the three neighbors had a meeting. Okay, what are we doing? How are we going to deal with this? How are we going to have our food covered and supplies? And we kind of doubled down and split up some roles, had conversations about where and how we would isolate if somebody gets sick, risk factors, because one of us has asthma, and we have an autoimmune system disorder on par. So there's some things that make being exposed to things not awesome. But basically, we started doing the first initial Holler Neighbor broadcast at about that time to say, like, because we were calling it Quarantined in the Holler. It did not change our day-to-day life in the holler at all, because we're out in the country and we don't go to movies and or do other things that I guess normal people do. I mean, I do go see symphonies and things like that, but when I do that, it's kind of a big deal because I have to drive an hour and a half to go see it, or I have to fly somewhere or drive somewhere far away to go see those things. If I was going to see a Broadway show, like, I got to go to New York, right? Or off Broadway, like a Broadway show that's traveling, I'm going to end up in Nashville or Memphis or wherever they end up. So it's a big investment to do any of those things that a lot of people who live in cities take for granted. And so we were kind of doing this like tongue-in-cheek series called Quarantined in the Holler, and showing the camera like we got nothing here except for trees and animals and the same things we have to do. And that doesn't mean that we don't sympathize with people who have been really sick. In fact, this is where I'm going to do a memorial. So, last week, our network lost somebody who contributed both to the LFTN network and the Survival Podcast network, and he got COVID a few weeks ago, ended up in the hospital, came home, and then I don't know if it was an aneurysm or a heart attack, but he died. So his wife is now facing a future without her husband. I don't know how old he was, but Buddy Dempsey, which if you're in our networks, you've seen him, was always an empowerer. And I was really sad to learn that he died. So that doesn't mean that this illness doesn't make people so sick that things happen and they die. It happened to him. And we're actually going to be at the Holler Roast. We're going to do one of our coffee of the months is going to be the Buddy blend, in memorial of him. So it's been hard to talk about this illness a bit because it is Convades. It has been blown up and out of proportion and used as a means of control. It has basically galvanized right from left. It's been used as a tool to divide, and it's been used as a tool to change how we view each other and how we are humans to each other. And it has been a lot. I think it has not been as successful as people think it has been. It has been semi-successful, but it has also gotten to a point of ridiculousness now to where people who didn't formerly see through it saw through it, and people who were just not saying anything because they're like, I'm going to get along, go along, get along. They're starting to say, I don't care what choice you make on the jab. I don't, this is what I care about. People are people. We're going to go along with that. And that's been kind of heartening for me to see. That doesn't mean that the pressure to instill authoritarian controls on us and to increase technological surveillance and all of those things that we fear, that doesn't mean they're not happening. It's just that at some point, humans are humans, and light overpowers dark, and dark can only stay in place for so long. And if so long is beyond my lifetime, I still know that eventually light will prevail. This is me. And so I'm not as worried about it as other people. I do get alarmed sometimes by, or I guess disappointed is more the word. I get disappointed when people aren't willing to look beyond their assumptions and say, what's going on here? And, it's hard to do. It's hard for me to do too, because I have some assumptions in here too. I actually think authoritarian control of our lives is bad. I go in with that assumption. That is my confirmation bias. And anything I see that confirms that I agree with, I got to dig down below that too and say, okay, is there another way? Can I question this? And I think it is a valid mental exercise to question this. But after that whole diatribe, back to the point, this is how we deal with illness in the holler now that we have convades here. So here's what happened. Last time I did this episode, I had a family of 4 visit me for Thanksgiving. My mom was here, I was here, and other random visitors were here. And my sister flew in. And at 2 a.m. on first night they were here, it was before Thanksgiving, I heard the following thing, which is enough to instill fear in anybody's heart, parent or not. Mommy, I'm gonna wet noise. Yeah, mommy, I'm gonna wet noise. You know what I'm talking about. It's like splat. You're like, that's vomit. Somebody just threw up all over the floor. And sure enough, one of my nieces hadn't been feeling real great. We thought she was just motion sick from being on a plane and then in a car and then coming here. And she had norovirus. Well, anybody who knows about what norovirus is knows that it's super contagious. And I had a family of 4 in my bedroom. I was sleeping in my guest room. Mom was sleeping down in the guest cabin where Tactical lives now. And so on that day, we established the bedroom as sort of the quarantine, but the parents were still sleeping in there with their kids. And then I stopped using the bathroom that is close to that bedroom and started using the other bathroom in my house and taking showers down at the cabin, because I figured if I don't come across the virus as much, I am not going to get sick. And it was Thanksgiving week. What is Thanksgiving all about? Yeah, Amy Dingman says wet noise is I'm going to use that now and forever. Yeah, it's like, mommy, I'm going to splat. And you're like, well, you didn't make it to the toilet. And then you're having this conversation. It's okay to not tell me and just go puke in the toilet and then tell me after. Like, those conversations have to happen. Anyway, so we set up movies for the girls to watch, and one of them wasn't sick. One of them was sick. The rest of us were healthy, and we're getting ready to serve all this yummy food for Thanksgiving. It was going to be so good. And we're all like, I really like these things that we make for Thanksgiving. And if I get the norovirus after eating whatever the thing is, I may not like that thing ever again as long as I live. Like, you all know how that's happened, right? Like, one time I had pizza and got the stomach flu. It took me a year to be able to eat pizza. And I like pizza. So, like, you don't want to do that with turkey or dressing or mashed potatoes or gravy or pumpkin pie or whatever else, chestnut dressing. Like, it could ruin Thanksgiving forever. And so we were sort of cautiously cooking the things to get ready for Thanksgiving, wondering if when then second man went down, mom got it. Not my mom of daughter, and other daughter got it. And so one daughter was recovering and, like, eating clear broth and other things very carefully. Other daughter's like puking into a bucket. Mom is puking into the toilet. And every time there was a puke incident, the entire bathroom got wiped down. And as I said, I was not using that room anymore. I was using a different room. I was staying out of the bedroom where the sick people were. And eventually, mom recovered. Other daughter started recovering, and it was Thursday of Thanksgiving week. And I remember sitting around the table. You know how at Thanksgiving you kind of overeat a little bit? You're like, feast, I'm going to have seconds. Nobody overate that time because we were all like, who's going down next? Because dad of daughter had not gotten it. I had not gotten it. My mom had not gotten it. People who were coming just didn't come because I called them and said, hey, we have norovirus here. You want to come over? Yeah, I don't think so. Go figure out your own Thanksgiving. So guests were not here. And we made it all the way through Thanksgiving. And then they flew home that Saturday. Dad threw up when he got home. My mom never got it. At the time I lived with somebody here. He got it right when they left, and I never got it. And that was all, I think, because I stopped using the bathroom and stayed away from the room. So what I learned from that is it's important to have a plan for how you isolate if you have something really contagious and just want to kind of keep it out from everybody else. And in hindsight, what I should have done was had my mom move up here, like cleaned everything up here, had mom move up here and had the family move down to the cabin where a sick person could be in the bedroom and the rest of the family could be in the living room, or, recovered kids could be up here. But you need to have, like with kids, you need to have interaction with them or it's not good. Right. So, and that's something we seem to have forgotten with the convades. Right. Anyway, that was the show I did years ago when that happened. So this time, what happened is that Tactical started complaining of a headache and feeling dehydrated on Friday night. And he'd been working Saturday outside. He couldn't get warm, but it was pretty cold when he was working outside. And I thought nothing of it. And I was like, well, take some electrolytes, keep drinking. And he was watering up. And, next morning I see him. He's like, man, I still got this headache. I'm like, okay, well, keep drinking and all of that. And all day long Saturday, he complained that he kind of felt like hungover, but hasn't had alcohol in months. And I was like, wow, that dehydration's really hitting you hard. And so we were invited to dinner at Jenny's, and I had him take his temperature before going to dinner at Jenny's. He did not have a fever. Went over, had dinner at Jenny's, left. And he was complaining about it. And I was like, you might be getting sick. He's like, no, I never get sick. Tactical, were you getting sick? Yeah, rest in peace, buddy. I agree with you, Josh. It's going to be sad not seeing his chats. He was getting sick. And so we had him set up on a pull-out couch in my living room, which may seem counterintuitive if isolation is important when the COVIDs come. But the other thing that's important is keeping people alive. And if somebody's getting sick, you want to observe them. And it's easier for me to observe somebody in my house. So I decided that, again, separation of bathroom would happen, and he would spend the night there just in case breathing became difficult. At that time, I was like, I wonder if it is convades, but it could be anything. It could be a cold. It could be the flu. It could be strep throat. Who knows? Right now, he has a headache. That's the only symptom. In the morning, he had a fever, 99.1. I don't think he's ever gone above that. And I was like, okay. So I texted everybody who saw him Saturday and texted everybody who's been around him in the last few days and said, he's got a fever. And I texted the person who was coming to spend the night at my house on Sunday night on their way through town. We've got a fever here. And then we decided to let him go ahead and take the test. And he took the test, and guess what? It was positive. At that point, I had a headache and a sore throat. And we initiated the increased vitamin protocols according to doctor's recommendations that the doctor that we're working with. And I will talk more about what that specifically is after I talk about, here's how we are addressing illness in the Holler. Step 1, we identified somebody was sick. Step 2, communicated it to everybody involved. And this means all the other Holler neighbors who kind of came across Tactical, but they hadn't really come across him, and he ate on a paper plate. So it wasn't even like he had dishes that he'd touched, but made sure they knew so they could make their own decision about vitamins or if they need to isolate or whatever that is. When we found out it was convades, we told everybody that too. I then circled back a few days, and we had workers here Friday and said, hey, this happened. And you were here Friday, so I just wanted you to know. So I kind of went back, and then as a result of that, one of them said, you know what? I'm sick right now too. And my wife was sick a few days before. I think we know who patient 0 was, but they had very mild symptoms. And so they thought it was a cold, and it might've been, I mean, who knows, but that's, and then we also thought about where did he go? Did he go anywhere that might have brought it? And because we were like, how did this happen? Because Tactical didn't go anywhere last week, except for he did go to Lowe's one time. I went to the vet on Friday and they had just reopened after having it ripped through their office. So maybe I brought it home and he got it because the current variant, within 24 hours, you can get it. Anyway, so we spent a little time, but we didn't spend a lot of time. It was just like being polite. And then we did part 2. People who are scheduled to come on Monday need to know that we have this here so they can decide not to come. And so we canceled the backhoe, and I let the person who's building Taj Mahal know. And he's like, I'm working out outside anyway. I don't care. Like, just don't come breathe on me, sort of thing. And so everybody, so basically what we did is I call it the don't be a dick phase. It's like, just let people know so they can make their own decisions. I had a bad cold over Thanksgiving. I had no way to test if it was COVID or not. And I told people, I'm really sick. If you don't, I mean, like I've got like drainage and cold symptoms. I don't have a fever. If you don't want to come, that's fine. I'm letting you know. So, like you communicate to all. And then it's like, okay, we're Holler neighbors. We have this person who's sick. So I kind of like reviewed the plan for how we treat that. Like what kind of support do they need? Do they need more vitamin C? Do they need soup made? Do they need like all of those things? How are we handling laundry? Are we isolating? Are we not isolating? All of those questions, and just sort of dig into what they have and how to care for it. So with norovirus, you can assess based on the symptoms of this norovirus and kind of figure out what it is. I can remember growing up as a kid, my dad sitting there with a book while I was sick saying, do you feel nauseous? Was your puke green or blue? Like he had this list of questions he would go through to assess what it is so he could figure out how contagious it is and how to support the recovery at home, and then go from there. And then also assess, is it food poisoning or the flu or a cold? If it's food poisoning, nothing's contagious. If it's the flu, everything is contagious, right? It's a good idea to learn those things in illnesses. And of course, now we know a lot more about convades than we ever did, 2 years ago. We have a better idea about how it spreads and how to treat it. And then once we figured that out, got Tactical set up with what he was going to do, I asked him, what do you want to do? Do you want to do anything? Because my opinion with any illness is if you feel like getting up and walking around a little bit outside, it's actually good for you to get up and walk around outside, as long as you're not pushing things to where your immune system is taxed too much. Like when you have pneumonia, if you get up and walk around outside and it's super cold and you get the chills and you over push it, you actually can make it worse. So, but with convades, it's actually, from everything I've heard, good to go on some small walks and breathe deeply and all of those things. And he said, I don't feel like doing anything, because at this point he now had some pain in his back and legs. And I said, so you want me to do the livestock? And he's like, it would be nice, which is redneck for yes, please. He never actually just says yes, please. And he would have never thought to ask me to do the animals. He would have like tried to push through and do the animals the whole time. So you have to be proactive and know your Holler neighbors and their tendency to communicate. Otherwise you get into trouble. It took me 2 years to figure out the redneck code, by the way, what means yes and what means no. Okay. And then I always tell them, so you mean yes. So you mean no. Okay. So then I said, okay, I'll go do the animals. I did the morning animals. I was starting to feel kind of icky. And this is where we got to step 4, make a plan to cover chores. And this comes from Nick Ferguson when he got sick. So years ago, Nick Ferguson had 1,000 or 2,000 trees set up on his property that he was manually watering, because why put in automated watering? Because it takes me like 15 minutes to do it. And then his wife, Katie, got really sick, like so sick she could not get out of bed. And he was caring for her and kind of keeping up on the chores, and it was fine, right? No, it was not. Then he got really sick. So he was sick. Kids were sick. Wife was sick. She recovered first. And during the course of that illness, he basically lost most of that nursery stock, because, the last thing you're going to do is ask your wife, who's barely able to get out of bed, but currently able to get out of bed, when you are unable to get out of bed, to go water plants in addition to everything else. It's like you cut your losses and you start prioritizing. We're going to keep the humans alive. Then we're going to keep the livestock. He lost some livestock, by the way, I think during this time too. Livestock alive, and then the plants alive, because is what it is. And he did a whole podcast about this at Homegrown Liberty, homegrownliberty.com, about that. He told that story and about why it's so important to automate your watering, because if you get super sick, then you're in trouble. Now, I took this to heart. I heat with wood. In order to heat with wood, one needs to take the wood and put it in the fire and keep the fire going. Otherwise, the fire goes out and you have no heat. I bought space heaters for every room in my house because if I get that sick, I don't care about the power bill. I'm putting the space heaters on. I got the oil circulating kind so that it's not catching things on fire. Yeah, Homestead Glamour says, I remember that. So what we do in the Holler is we make a plan to cover chores. Now, I covered chores in the morning. I was like, when I did that, I noticed there wasn't enough pig feed down by the pig pasture. And if I get sick, I don't want to have to go carry 50-pound bags of pig feed from the top of the hill to the bottom of the hill. So I reached out to Nighthawk, and we'd already decided that because I eat dinner with Tactical probably every day or every other day, I was more exposed than everybody else, that I would isolate too, and they're making their own decisions based on symptoms. So I'm isolating from them, by the way. So that was our isolation plan. Tactical's in the cabin by himself. We pass things through the door. I am isolating from everybody else here until I know, and then they are isolating from me, but we can hand things off. So I reached out to Nighthawk on Zello and said, hey, could you bring like 4 or 5 bags of pig feed down to the pig pasture with your 4-wheeler and just let me know when that's done, because I'm down to like 1 bag down there and that could be a huge problem, right? And he said, sure. And I'm thinking like, I'm still feeling good. So I'm looking around like, where else do we need to stock up so it's easy to maintain stuff? But thing is, Tactical has spent the last 2 years trying to set things up so it's easy. So there's hardly anything to do. So I heard Nighthawk do it. He confirmed it was done. He brought me an extra thermometer so I could take my temperature, because I was not, even sterilized, because I'm a weird germ person. I was not going to use the thermometer that Tactical is using. That's gross. Yeah. So I've learned something about how many thermometers I need to keep on hand this time. We'll talk about that when I talk about medical preparedness related to this. So we came up with a plan, and then Nighthawk said, do you want me to do nighttime animals? I said, could you please? Because I've got a sore throat, headache, and I'm not feeling that great either. Now, I had already started taking extra vitamins and other things once I found out Tactical had it, and I'd been exposed. And I reached out to the doctor to say, hey, what do we do for Tactical? Just like, what's the latest? Because there's the doctor who I work with is in our network, and he is regularly treating people with COVID. So he knows what he does with his patients. I'm one of his patients. Tactical is one of his patients. So I was just like, this is going on. And he's kind enough that he will respond to a text message on the weekend in a situation that seems urgent. I'm going to take a drink now. So we got that all planned. And then I was like, you know what? I started to feel better by the afternoon. So then we communicated the plan to everybody. And I realized that I didn't have some things I needed to have. I got a call from the doctor, and there were a couple of things he recommended I didn't have on hand. So I did what I always do in that situation. I texted Jenny. Jenny, do you have these things, or can you pick up these things if you are not isolating? Because I didn't know if she was or wasn't. And she was like, what's that for? And I said, this. And she said, okay, I'll bring over a care package. So this happens every time we have a problem where my medical kit is inadequate. Jenny has it. I told Jenny last night, I need to do a show with you about medical kit setup, because you always have the things I don't, which means I need to get better at mine. And that would be a good conversation to have on the podcast. So look forward to that show at some point. But she's always the one who has the extra things that nobody thought they needed. It's always kind of funny. Like Aleve was on that list because somebody has sore muscles and wants to have, has that. Now, I'm getting a comment from online. Sounds like what happened here at our place. Horrible headache, low fever, cold symptoms, positive test. Going out in the cold weather was wonderful for me because the cold just made me feel better. Yeah, Meredith, it does. And breathing that fresh air. They've said the whole time, like getting out and walking and deep breathing really helps expel the virus, I guess. And that's true with colds too. So it's actually a great thing to do. So Jenny brought her care packages over and sort of handed them off to me. And the way we do isolation here is everybody decides their level of comfort on isolation. I was originally setting a quarantine room up in my house and dedicating a bathroom to Tactical so I could be close by if he needed help. When I'm sick, he usually sleeps in my living room so he can be close by if I need help. This time, after talking to the doctor and talking to his dad, who's a doctor, we decided it was better for him to quarantine in the cabin as long as he's not feeling that bad. And while he is feeling bad, he's not feeling that bad, right? Tactical, you're not feeling that bad. Like his O2 levels are high because I have a pulse oximeter from having pneumonia, so we can measure that. His oxygen's fine. He's not having trouble breathing, which is the thing you worry about with the grip, right? And so we just isolated because I ended up taking a test and I tested negative. So I have symptoms, but I'm tested negative, which could mean I have mild symptoms of it, or it could mean that I have something else that I'm sort of fighting off. Who knows? I actually don't care. I originally thought if I get the symptoms, then I'm not going to test because we've already had the test and that's probably what I was exposed to. But then I tested so I would know if I was interacting with people, am I shedding the virus? Like if I'm handing something through the door or something, like how careful do they want me to be? I'm probably not going to test again at this point. If I get bad symptoms and I need to feel like I'm going to go to an old folks home and I need to clear myself, then I will test. But at this point, I am still isolating. I'm telling people, like, this is what's up. Do you want to talk to me outside? Like, what's your deal? Like, this is where I'm at. I reached out to all my coffee customers who put orders in over the weekend and said, I was exposed to COVID and this is what's happened. Do you want me to wait to produce your order? I don't actually touch the coffee beans when I'm roasting, but they need to make that decision. So far, all of my customers have said, just roast my coffee, whatever. So then the doctor told me to also take the Convades protocol, but at a lighter amount, which I started yesterday. And I have an occasional headache right now, which is not unusual for normal me. Like the floating weird ache headache just comes through sometimes. I get body aches at night if I stay up too late. So yesterday I felt like I had stayed up till 3 a.m. and then gotten up at my usual time and like had the headache thing going on and a little scratchy throat. Today, no scratchy throat. And as I said, I've had, 2-minute headaches that float by, which that could be anything right now. So hopefully I'm dodging this bullet. And then unfortunately Tactical has bad body aches still. So he's dealing with the actual symptoms. So that's how we handled it here. We made quarantine the cabin. I reached out to Neethi about what should I feed him to support his immune system. So he's on a special diet. I'm actually eating that too, because if I'm going to cook one meal, I'm not going to cook two. And I'm coming down with, pots of stewed beef and stuff like that, leaving it there after I've taken whatever I want. And then he's eating that. She said, absolutely no eggs, Tactical, no eggs. But I ran out of beef, and beef was like the core of what we're supposed to be eating here. So I reached out and asked her, and she's like, yeah, pork is okay. Lamb is okay. She prefers not venison. But here's where I'm at with that, guys. He's getting whole foods. He's getting nutritious foods. He's eating when he's hungry. And if I run out of the best options, we're just going to cook what's here. That is what it is. I made some chicken soup, but he's not getting that because she said that's on the fat. But if we run out of everything else, he's getting that. That's what's going to happen. I'm getting that, though. Ha, 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 ha. I know, Tactical, you miss chicken, and I think it tastes like rotten fish. It's a good time. It's a good time. The medical kit lessons learned was this. You should have one thermometer for everybody who you support, plus one in case one breaks. And what I had was one thermometer here and didn't have... And he used it, and I'm like, well, that's gross. It's just been in somebody else's mouth, and I'm weird about stuff like that. So I realized I need my own dedicated thermometer and then the guest thermometer. And luckily, Nighthawk had two new ones he just got. So he was covered, and he gave me one of his, which is why I have my own dedicated thermometer now. The other thing on the pulse oximeter, those are great to have because the media campaign on this scares people to death about breathing problems. And so if you have any little breathing problem and you're scared of ending up on a vent, which like it happened to Buddy, right? It can happen. You can make it worse on yourself by being terrified. And the pulse oximeter, you're like, oh, 97, 98, whatever. And and it can be a peace of mind thing. As I said, I had it because I had pneumonia. I saw them use it at the doctor on me. They thought, hey, I was a smoker and didn't believe my oxygen was that low. And then they x-rayed my chest and they're like, oh, you have pneumonia. That's why you don't have any oxygen. I'm like, yeah, I am not a smoker. I have, I smoked some cigarettes when I was 16 and that was a long time ago. And it wasn't for very long because I joined the swim team and then you cannot be a competitive swimmer and a smoker and do well as being a competitive swimmer. So I made the choice. I made the right choice. I'm really glad that happened because I am not addicted to cigarettes today. Anyway, they didn't believe me though. It's like that typical skeptical doctor thing. Are you a smoker? No. They give you that look like, yeah, right. You probably smoke pot or something, lady. Like, no, I don't smoke anything. I don't like the feeling of smoke going into my lungs. It's very uncomfortable. Anyway, so having 2 pulse oximeters would be great in our situation because I am up here and he is down there. If I want to take mine, which I measure every so often when I'm having trouble breathing, which I sometimes have trouble breathing, completely unrelated to the convades. I can't do it now because it's down there. And so I ordered a second one of those so he can have his own and I can have my own long term. Because if I actually get sick, I'll need to measure it. And like right now, I'm not short of breath, so we're fine. So that was another thing. And then I do not stock painkillers except for Tylenol because I'm allergic to ibuprofen and I don't use painkillers. When I'm in pain, I go to sleep or I use heat or like I do a lot of other things before I turn to painkillers. And I'm lucky and fortunate that I don't have any excruciating pain in my life. Like sometimes I break a bone or I have a cut that hurts, right? And more often than not, I get a burn. But if I get a headache, I'm like, what's causing the headache? Is it lack of water? Is it lack of caffeine? Is it I'm not feeling well and I need to sleep? Okay, then go to sleep. Like I try to go through all these things and address the underlying problem. When I have the flu and get the body aches, I go to bed. I take baths. Baths are the best thing for the body aches, by the way. And if I really can't handle it, I will take like a flu sort of thing, which basically just puts you to sleep so you can sleep it off. And other than that, I don't have painkillers around because if I have a headache, I'm not taking an aspirin. If I have, lady cramps, I'm not taking an aspirin. I try to address the underlying issue. And that's because my theory is the fewer chemicals I put in my body, the better off I'm going to be long term. And a painkiller is a chemical, in my opinion. However, if I cut my arm off and I was at the hospital and they offered me morphine or whatever they give you in the hospital these days for the pain, I would totally do that. Like I am a total pain wimp. When they took my tonsils out, I used a painkiller until some of the healing happened. So that's, and when I've had the couple of times I've had surgery done, I was totally happy to be put under while that happened. Like I don't need to sit there and man it out, but that is what it is. So here's what we're doing to keep everybody else like strong and tapping into community and nutrition. I have a list of 3 things I don't have here and Jenny's picking them up for me. So that's super helpful that she's able to do that. And she was, as I said, able to bring her kit over. I also need tarps for my firewood because it's no longer undercover because my porch is gone. It's going to rain tomorrow and Taj Mahal won't be done yet. Because, if Taj Mahal could be built in a day, it would, but it's not going to be built in a day. So I need to make sure my firewood that I'm actually using doesn't get just completely soaked because I need to use that for heat. And it's really hard to light a fire with wet wood. And then nutritionally speaking, like I have 1 or 2 cocktails a week. Usually it's just bourbon and some ice or a scotch or something of that nature. I don't like mix stuff much anymore. Occasionally I'll have a Manhattan. But I cut out most of my drinking in the last year. And I'm not having any alcohol at all right now, knowing I've been exposed just because my body because alcohol's a poison. And if you put a poison in your body, it has to fight that off. And it'll do that before it fights off whatever you're exposed to. So I want to keep my immune system supported. Secondly, sugar, no sugar. So the chocolate fix, gone. No more chocolate for me for a week. Very unhappy about this. But, it's worth it. I want to stay strong. And that's another thing. And then nutritionally, it's all whole foods here. So we're primarily eating beef and beef stews. We are adding salt, pepper, garlic. I've been told to add oregano. I don't know if I have any right now. I'll have to go look. And then I'm also adding a little bit of turmeric. It's an anti-inflammatory to the food. Coffee after eating, and no eggs. No eggs. I'm also no eggsing. Tactical was really unhappy with me when I told him no eggs, and he goes, "Why?" And I said, "Estrogen." And he said, "Oh, there is some natural estrogen in eggs." And so I just cut them out for a week, and we'll see how we do in a week. And because, again, I'm not going to cook a couple of things for me and a couple of things for somebody else. And I'm, Tactical's actually starting to cook for himself. He's feeling well enough, so that may change. But I was just like, well, I'm going to be cooking for 2 people for a while because he's sick. And I have, I know where all the things are in the freezer, so I'll just get that done. And it's super easy to cook that stuff, guys. If you have a pressure cooker, like I went yesterday because I had nothing defrosted for this. I was like, stew meat, a roast, and some ground. And I put it all in the pressure cooker. And I took a jar of beef broth I'd already made and went, and I added some spices and salt. And I hit go for 25 minutes. Opened it up to see if it was tender enough, cut it all up, everything that needed to be cut up. And that was it. It was done. It was tasty. Like I ate it last night. I ate it for breakfast this morning. And now I'm going to make some lamb ribs today. So it was super easy with the pressure cooker. So that's what we're doing nutritionally. And then we'll see how we go from there. He is already feeling better. The headache is mostly gone. He's got the body aches to deal with. I talked to my sister who just had it, and he's following the same timeline she did. And it's a lot of the same symptoms. And she said, like, the backache and leg ache was for about 2 days. I had body aches for 3 days and intermittent headaches after that. She's had a lot of fatigue. And then she also had a deep, terrible, angry depression for 3 days that she had to deal with. And she didn't really talk about it. She was just like, why do I feel this way? And then she's like, oh, wait, the virus is making me feel this way, right? So I gave him a heads up on that. So if he starts feeling angry, doesn't know why, and it's like, why am I mad at everybody? He can be like, oh, I got to go do my unmad things. That's something a lot of people aren't talking about, although some people are. And almost everybody I know who have had the latest iteration of the stuff have had anger or depression issues come up. And then, it's made worse by the isolation we put people through. So Tactical and I, here's the best part, is having communications set up so you can talk like normal is helpful. And the Zello app on my phone has been great because he can just talk to me. Hey, you there? Got a question? Or just talk about whatever you want to talk about. Like we'd talk in the doorway or talk in my living room if he was here. So I think that's a really nice tool to just keep you connected with people. We also have basically these walkie-talkie things for everybody in the Holler, so that Brian Young set us up with. So if Zello goes down, we have that as a backup. So those are on the charger now so that we can talk to each other if that needs to happen. And then when I hand stuff up, I'm actually comfortable talking to him outside. So I just talk to him outside if he wants to talk about whatever, whether it's logistics or just like, I was thinking about this fencing plan. Because here's the problem now. Tactical is not out doing stuff. Do you know what he's doing now? He's thinking about stuff. Do you know what that means? He's going to want to start projects and talk about them. That's what's happening right now. It's scary. It's scary when the guy gets to thinking about doing stuff around the homestead. Anyway, I'm over dramatizing. So he's actually getting a lot of time to think about, where do I want to put fencing? How do I want to do pigs from here? Like all of these things that happen. And that's kind of fun. So what I am going to talk to you about nutritionally, what I'm actually doing for the outbreak. Um, and I was prepared for this going in. So a while ago, I got a prescription for hydroxychloroquine. Yes, hydroxychloroquine, the thing they tell you should not use for COVID. I'm taking it. He's taking it. There's nothing wrong with that. Like, when you look at the side effects of it and you look at whether or not it might help, it appears that it's helpful early on in combination with zinc and with an antibiotic. I am not taking the antibiotic, and neither is he, because he was just on one for his finger. And so the recommendation was not to start a second one. So when the outbreak happened, he started by taking it. I like agonized over if I should, because I couldn't reach a doctor and ask that question. And I was like, screw it. It's not going to kill me to take it. I'll just take it prophylactically and hopefully it will help. So I took that with zinc. So that's one thing that's happening. Now let's talk about horse dewormer. The studies on horse dewormer are, ridiculed by the media here, and they say it doesn't work. But then when you start looking at other places where horse dewormer is used, you notice that it appears that if you get it early on, it can help, and it can help preventatively. So we both started on, yes, you guessed it, ivermectin. At the doses recommend, for me, it's prophylactically, so it's not treatable. It's a different dosage for him. And that was also something I already had on hand, because when I heard that was something that might be useful, what you don't want to have to do is wait for 2 days after you get sick when it's something that you should be taking early on. And so I just had it here, and he had his there. So I'm taking two controversial things, and both of them are very low risk for side effects. So if they don't work at all, okay. If they do work, great. That's my feeling on that. In addition to that, my vitamin D, I was told to increase it to a specific amount that I'm not telling you what it is because it's specific to me, but you can figure it out if you go read stuff about it. I just don't want to make recommendations. None of this is recommendations. I'm just telling you what I did. Lots of vitamin C, immune system support. Also quercetin, which is an ionophore that helps open up your blood vessel, your cells to accept zinc, which helps fight off virus getting into those cells, right? Which is really good. What else am I taking? I'm taking normal stuff. Like, I'm taking my normal daily vitamin, and I added my iron back. I was actually taking a break on iron because I do that sort of on a schedule. What else? I can't remember. I do have elderberry syrup available, but that's not the thing. I think that's pretty much the protocol that we're doing here. I did melatonin to sleep at night. He is taking melatonin. Well, he may not have taken it yesterday, but it was in his care package from Jenny. So, hey, look in your care package if you didn't notice that. So melatonin to help him sleep. And then he talked to a different doctor who said Pepsid helps also with getting rid of the virus. And then we are going to be doing nebulizers with a specific formula of water and some other things to help clear out the nasal passages. So that is everything we are doing. I can tell you this. Yesterday, I had a hangover. A hangover. I did not have a hangover yesterday. I had a headache that felt like a hangover yesterday. And I had a sore throat. It was sore on the right side and not the left side. And I felt heavy here in my chest. And then what I did was I had the conversation or the consult, and I had already started the hydroxychloroquine. I started on the ivermectin, and then I increased some of my other vitamins at the recommendation of my doctor. And by today, I woke up and I had a little bit of a headache this morning. As I said, it's gone. I don't have a scratchy throat. I feel actually totally fine right now. I'm staying on this increase. Like, it's like a bump up on vitamins for 5 days. I'm going to do that for 5 days, then go back to normal. That's what he told me to do. And we'll do that. Tactical's on a different increase, higher vitamin C than I am, and some other things. And then the other thing is to increase probiotics in the gut, and we do that by drinking kvass, which is fermented beet juice and eating ferments like the cabbage. And then also I do take, I'm augmenting with a probiotic. And part of that's because I don't know what the hydroxychloroquine is going to do to my gut bacteria. So I'm doing like the gut support as well. So that's everything we're doing. I don't know if you have any questions about that. If you want to ask questions about it, just throw it in the comments, guys. I'll stay on after the podcast, and you can share with me your stories too. So this is the big part of today's episode. How is this different from how we deal with other contagious illnesses here? Is it different? What do you think? It's not different at all. The only difference for this one versus the flu is the specific recommendation of things to take to boost the immune system, and the specific recommendation of things to take in response to having it, to get rid of it. That's it. That's it. And as far as how we assess communicating and covering our animals and deciding if we isolate and how we're going to isolate and getting supplies and any of those things, when I look back at what we did for norovirus, what we did for strep throat when Nighthawk had strep throat, what we've done when Jenny's boys get sick because they've had like this and that cold, it's not any different at all. And I think it's important to remember that, because with the media hype, we feel like we need to put on hazmat suits and whatever, right? It's a contagious illness that can be really bad for some people, that so far isn't bad for us, thankfully. And we've had 2 years to address underlying bad habits that make it worse. And we know what those are. I have lost right now 25 pounds or 27 pounds from when COVID started in 2020. So I took that as get more fit and get more healthy. Tactical has addressed some lifestyle issues. He has a few more to address, but he's addressed some important lifestyle issues that could have made this worse for him. I know both Jenny and Nighthawk have addressed some of their lifestyle issues, things that they could control to make themselves stronger. And that's pretty cool, because now 2 years later, it's probably the less virulent version of it. As Joshua said earlier, like if it's the latest one, you're going to get it milder. Yeah. And we're more ready for it. Let's say, what did he say? He said, my flaws during my Rona. Flaws. 100 pounds of medical supplies, but I lost track of that darn thermometer. Okay, yeah. Losing. And then he says he wishes he would have doubled his zinc and quercetin and D earlier. Yeah. So my zinc, quercetin, and D have pretty much doubled for 5 days. And that's what the doctor told me to do. So, and I've also looked into those things, and that's what I'm going to do. Anyway, I hope you found this helpful. If you have the illness hitting your family, I hope you come through it as mildly as we have so far. I hope it continues to be mild here. And I plan to be like on all my live streams this week, no matter what, as long as I can. So we'll keep on keeping on, and do keep Tactical in your thoughts, because he's super grumpy about having body aches. He's super grumpy. With that, if you like the show and the work I do, you can support me in 2 ways. 1, get your Holler Roast at hollerroast.com, your coffee at hollerroast.com. 2, think about becoming a member. If you want to know more about that, just go to livingfreeintennessee.com, click on membership, sign up, and you'll be a member. With that, guys, go out, make it a great week. And I still have questions to answer from the live feed, so I'm staying on, but I needed to have that silence so that I know where to edit the audio when we do the audio podcast. And there's this new feature I heard Jack talk about where you can star things, and I starred. Z Torrance says, what was the stuff called when you ferment your forage cuttings to improve the nutrition for your animals? You've talked about it in your podcast with John and Nick. Okay, we did a forage recording. Growing forward. So this is silage. Silage is fermenting leaves from trees, right? If you're fermenting something else, we might call it something else, but silage, S-I-L-A-G-E. And basically what you do, put the leaves in a oxygen-free environment or sealed environment, put in some some molasses or sugar of some sort to get the bacteria started, and you ferment those leaves, and they suddenly become a lot more attractive to livestock. So, by the way, guys, if you want to start throwing questions in, just try to do them in all caps so I know you have it. But basically, the way Nick said to do it on a homestead scale, because on a farm scale, you're doing a big building of silage that you're going to feed to your cattle and your pigs and your goats and your chickens. Homestead scale, which is my scale, he said just use a leaf shredder, and you take the whip that you maybe harvested from your mulberry, put it in that leaf shredder that has a bag attachment attached to a contractor bag. Pull the whip back out, like it just pulls the leaves off, right? That goes into the bag. You put the molasses or sugar or whatever you need to get started, and then you twist that bag, bend it over, duct tape it real well, put it aside, and it will turn into silage. And it will ferment in there, and all the good bugs will make all sorts of things. So that's what we were talking about when we were talking about, fermenting feed for your animals. Any other questions or comments before I go? Great chat, Nicole. Thanks. Thank you for coming, Martison family. What's funny is you guys come on this, like I see Dave Clark. Hi, Dave Clark. You guys come on this, and you have your code names, and then I find out later you're somebody I actually know sometimes. That's always kind of fun. Bobby said, quit drinking completely after reading this Naked Mind. Alcohol was so bad for you. Yeah. I really like how alcohol tastes like different liquors, and that's the part that's hard for me to give up. But I also decided maybe I shouldn't have that much in my body. Tori, love this episode. Glad you liked it. It's going to be out in audio format in an hour or two. Anyway, if there aren't any other questions, I'm going to say goodbye for now, and we'll do some more live recordings as we move forward. This is me with COVID. Or maybe I don't have it. I don't know. If I have it, it's gone now. So that's good. Hopefully I have super immunity. Talk to you guys later.